Welcome to Her Discovered Power, the podcast where we try to provide every single good-hearted woman tools and knowledge that can empower and free you from so many of the emotional aspects that impact you most, from our earliest teachings and societal implications. I'm Dave Jones with Captive Coaching and Empowerment, and this is my mission and my passion because of what I've seen happen with the women in my life, including my own mother. We're here to help you be the she that you were meant to be. Hope you follow us, hope you share us, and hope you enjoy the episode.
Well, good morning, David, and welcome back to Her Discovered Power. This is the podcast where we talk about emotional growth, relationships, and what it really looks like when women step into their power. Today, we're talking about an interesting topic. It's a topic that sounds warm and fuzzy, romantic and harmless until you actually look at what it does to good-hearted women. It's the myth of unconditional love. This is the concept we were fed growing up, the fairy tale in the movies and books, and it was made to be the gold standard. So, David, let's get into it.
Well, Sherry, you are 100% right. It was. And that's why we're here to dispel it. And by doing so, I'm going to lovingly ruin it for everybody.
Lovingly.
Yeah, exactly. Because, unconditional love, as adults try to practice it, is not only unrealistic, it's absolutely dangerous for good-hearted people, especially good-hearted women, Sherry.
Well, let's start where this concept began. Where did we get this idea of unconditional love?
Well, you talked about some of the different parts of movies and books and things like that, but most of us really were introduced in adolescence. Maybe we saw rom-coms where two people magically loved each other no matter what. We heard family members talk about finding someone who loves you unconditionally, as though, like you mentioned, it's the gold standard. We read books where love conquered all, even when the red flags the size of billboards were ignored.
Hmm. So it sounds like it was really from the beginning of time because this unconditional love is baked in and we were young and impressionable and believed it.
Not only believed it, but sought it as the brass ring, so to speak.
Mm.
And then we layered on some of the religious teachings, cultural expectations, Sherry, the emotional modeling we saw at home. Somewhere along the way, many of us combined some other insight from familial advice and societal contemplations, as well as the elements of perhaps the romance novels we reference. But the concept of unconditional love became not only an aspiration, but seemingly like the love that good people could only hope for and truly seek. And before we knew it, unconditional love became that brass ring, that ultimate relationship goal.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I remember being in one of my first relationships thinking, is it supposed to be this hard? I mean, nobody explained the fine print. I was going to say it's gone so far as to even make us think that it's not socially acceptable to be single.
Sherry, you are so right from a separate point of unconditional love. You're exactly right. All of those fairy tales, a woman had to have a man, right?
Mm.
Nobody ever said, hey, by the way, unconditional love is only healthy in one direction, and that is from parent to child.
Mm.
And everywhere else, it's a recipe for disaster. And I'm here to explain, Sherry, to all of our listeners, why the concept of unconditional love is not only something that the really is only the essence of myth, but also why I warn every single one of my single coaching clients ever about seeking.
Mm. So are you saying that the good-hearted women are the most vulnerable to this? Why would it hit them the hardest?
Just so that we're all on the same page, in my coaching, a good hearted person is really merely this: an individual that seeks to benefit their world and is willing to be aware of how their actions impact others positively or negatively. And they consider both of those when they're trying to determine how they're going to act as a fellow citizen to their fellow citizen. And as you know, I only have that desire to work with those people who are good hearted, that are looking to improve their world. The people that aren't good hearted, they can be on their own. But the good hearted women who seek to always do well and help others in their world and not be unhealthy, selfish, they're the ones that, in my opinion, that need that greatest level of help, because they're the ones that are affected most negatively about this subject, because good-hearted women are conditioned, like you said, from childhood, right? But they're also conditioned not only about the fantasy of those Disney movies, but they're also conditioned to be compliant, to be gentle, peacekeeping, and self-sacrificing, right?
Hmm. Well, I'm confused there. So you're saying that they're conditioned to do it, or is it innate in them, these good hearted women?
Oh, most definitely conditioned,
Mm.
because all of us, men and women, come out of the womb with the same level of strength and the same level of emotional empowerment and emotional intelligence. We're trained throughout unconscious and conscious learning to understand what is expected of us. And every single child, male or female, is coming from a standpoint that they have to seek safety, and they will act or react in such a way that they will feel safe and acceptable to their environment. And that means meeting their expectations. And they're so often, as good hearted women, they start out as those girls, and they're taught to be the emotional glue. They're taught to be the ones who make it work.
Mhm. So somewhere along the way, they just stop asking themselves what they actually want because they're so wrapped up in serving others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Unfortunately, and to me, it's an absolute tragedy that so many good hearted women absolutely come through childhood into adolescence and into adulthood, Sherry, where they're really intellectually, they know that they have desires, but unconsciously, it is as though those desires and those goals come second to everybody around them, if they're allowed to unconsciously give them any merit at all. It's tragic.
Mm. It makes me really sad because they don't even realize what they're losing. They're losing themselves and they lose a good chunk of their lives until they realize it.
Oh, absolutely. But like I mentioned before, this is so common, and it happens with men and women, just more often, way more often with women. But this is really where the danger begins, in that childhood training. It happens, like I mentioned, to every single child. But most of us good hearted people learn those untaught lessons. And in it, they learn that the unconditional love is a quality to which good people need to aspire, as though the best version of a person, Sherry, would always love unconditionally. This is where good hearted people begin our troubles. And because unconditional love in adult relationships require you to ignore your boundaries, it also requires you to ignore your needs. It requires you to ignore your standards and your emotional safety. That's the reason it's so dangerous.
Mm. I would say it requires you not to judge as well, which all of those things you just mentioned are the opposite of empowerment for women.
Well, it's fascinating you mentioned that word, because here's a circumstance, we're taught not to judge, but the reality is we do it every day. If we did not have the ability to judge, we would not have the ability to choose. The key is that we're not supposed to prejudge. But when we have data, absolutely, that's something that we have to do. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about this further on in this episode. But the reality, Sherry, to your point, because we were taught not to judge, most good-hearted people, whether or not it is religiously based or culturally based, the reality is we've been taught not to judge. And the unfortunate part about that is that those basis for that concept really, not to get too religious, is really from the standpoint of a passage that is in many of the tomes of religions, and that is, "Judge not lest ye be judged." But the reality is, that means that if you're willing to be judged, you can judge. And most good-hearted women are judging themselves more than anybody else.
Hmm.
So what ends up happening is the emotional self-abandonment comes disguised as a virtue. When we sit there and feel that we have to lose all these boundaries, it's as though it's what the gold standard is supposed to be, like you so eloquently put. And I submit that women that suffer this difficulty, they do it far more frequently than men because the additional baggage that girls learn early, because they're supposed to be compliant and gentle and peacemakers and appeasers. And this all leads many women toward the belief that they must accept less than they desire, if they even consider it on an unconscious basis, and often not to even contemplate what they do
Mm.
deserve.
Gives me a little bit of anxiety because I lived that way for years. But I would say one of the most powerful distinctions that you made for me was the difference between acceptance and approval. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I absolutely will, and this is huge for every single one of my coaching clients. As I mentioned before, I only work with good-hearted people, and good-hearted people really have a tendency to have a confusion between these two words. And it comes back to what you mentioned just a moment ago about judge.
Hmm.
Acceptance means acknowledging who someone is. That's really all that that means. It means we are accepting their beliefs for them. It's accepting their attitudes for them. It's accepting their behaviors for them without trying to change them. Okay. Acceptance says, I see you clearly, all of which may make them, maybe diametrically opposed to every single one of our beliefs and therefore not a fit for us. Acceptance means I see who that person is. Approval means I see who this person really clearly is and what he or she is about, and I want them in my life because they are synonymous kind of with me. Maybe they're a good-hearted person. Maybe the person that we're accepting is not a good-hearted person. Acceptance does not mean approval or to have a right for us
Hmm. I mean, I understand.
or a right to us.
Right to us. I understand that. And I do think unconditional love confuses the two, but I'm wondering where the line is. Meaning, when you're in a relationship, there is a certain amount of compromise to make that work. So, where is the line between if you approve them, I want you in my life?
That's a fantastic question. You often ask the one that's right between the lines because, Sherry, good-hearted women have that confusion. They have that question. Well, hey, good-hearted men do as well. But again, the good-hearted women that we're talking about, they find themselves in the middle of that line. But that's one of the reasons we're doing this episode, right? To
Hmm.
help them determine which is healthy and which is unhealthy. Well, good-hearted women are taught that loving means accepting and approving, right? Like we just talked about.
Hmm.
And even when those violate their values, their boundaries, or their emotional well being, that is the key to whether or not somebody is healthily, vulnerably loving someone. It is loving unconditionally.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, I feel like there is I guess I'm just trying to understand how to clarify that because I was in a relationship where I felt like I had to stay and tolerate it no matter what because that's what I was taught.
Because of the teachings. You're so right. Good-hearted women confuse loyalty with self-sacrifice. You said it perfectly right there. And based on how you said that, all of our listeners can understand that it's still somewhat a quandary in your mind.
Hmm.
See, Good hearted women confuse compassion with tolerance. They confuse unconditional love with unconditional access. And it's not because of incompetence, it's not because of lack of intelligence, it's because of what we have been trained.
Hmm. So we end up staying in relationships where we're emotionally starving and can't explain why. But I think leaving, we would feel like we're unloving and we would be judged.
Yes. I'm going to give you an example. 24 years ago when my father passed away, I had to give the eulogy. And in my words that day, Sherry, I spoke to the congregation that were there to honor him. And one of the things I had written to convey was something that was really personal to me. And at the time, I meant it with every ounce of gratitude, respect, and love. And I stood there and I proclaimed to everybody there that my father and my mother had such a love affair that was so beautiful that it taught my sister and I how to love unconditionally. I mean, I truly meant those words as one of the greatest compliments I could fathom for him. But years later, and really prior to my own discovery, my purpose in coaching and my own inner work was that even though my parents had a wonderful love story, it was not a benefit to my sister and I because we learned how to love unconditionally, yes. But in fact, that was what was so dangerous to us because one of the aspects of when we love unconditionally, we expect to seek it in another.
I think that's where a lot of women will recognize themselves. Can you explain that danger that you're talking about?
I sure can. And this is why I call unconditional love really a bunch of ooey because we must judge others and we must be willing to be judged. That's the key. Like I mentioned before, is just to not prejudge. But when someone shows us who they are, and you often will quote Maya Angelou, we must believe them the first time, right?
Yeah.
Because they will never change for us. Our judgment of them is not a proclamation, Sherry, right? That they don't have the right to fresh water and fresh air to live. We're not stating that they have no business being on the planet Earth with us. What we're stating is that when a good-hearted woman practices unconditional love, three things happen to protect them that they have to be aware of so that they can protect themselves. Because we're not stating they don't have a right to live, we're just stating they don't have a right to us. When a good hearted woman loves unconditionally, one of the biggest things that happens that creates the danger is she then attracts people who want unconditional acceptance from others because they know they can't meet conditions. When we attract those who seek those of us who love unconditionally, we're attracting people who unconsciously, sometimes even consciously, but unconsciously and inherently know everyone else has conditions, Sherry.
Mm,
Conditions they don't want to or cannot meet. So they seek out the woman who doesn't require any.
so common. So common.
Right? This is
Yes.
the reason why. And so here's the second thing that happens. When we love unconditionally, we then teach ourselves that we don't really deserve conditions. And when a good woman does this, conditionally, we convey to ourselves that we not only don't deserve conditions, but we unconsciously begin to diminish our worth and most likely are confirming the lack of worth that we already had in the first place in our unconscious emotional mind. Then she internalizes that belief that her needs are negotiable, her boundaries are optional, and her worth is conditional. And that's no bueno.
Vicious cycle there.
It exactly is. Because then typically what happens there, we accept somebody into our love life that will act in ways that will confirm all those negative things. Right? The
Mhm.
the partner who absolutely treats us like crap, puts us down, confirms inside of our unconscious emotional mind that our worth is less than them, and they continue to do that in such a way to try to prop them up. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, it does. I have one question though.
Yeah.
Um, if so I know with women, when we're in these relationships, we feel like if I just do this or I just say this, then they'll react differently. They'll be different. Why do we do that?
Mhm. That's that's an entirely topic for an
Oh,
entirely
okay.
another whole episode. But the short answer is this: is fear, Sherry.
Ah, okay.
Fear that we won't like the result. Fear that the circumstance will escalate. Fear that we are no longer being the compliant little girl or little boy that we were trained to be.
Mm, I see. So we go back
Okay.
to what we know.
That's exactly right. Those emotional patterns that we develop in childhood, we bring forth into adulthood until unless we work together with a coach or do our inner workings in such a way that we eliminate those early emotional patterns. And as you know, I call them pool rules, primary occurrence of learning. When we eliminate those from our childhood and we develop our new pool rules for the rest of our life. But until we do that, we're following the same pool rules that that 3 year old or that 4 year old or that 5 year old Sherry developed to feel as safe as possible during those earlier years to meet her boundaries, to meet her conditions that were placed upon her to try to fit in as much as possible so that she would feel as safe as possible. And she follows the same emotional patterns all the way through adulthood, just like you did until we broke them and wrote new ones in our coaching, right?
Hmm.
It's huge.
It is. Wow.
Good woman loves unconditionally. The third thing that happens is because no healthy adult relationship can function without conditions, she ends up disappointed, heartbroken, or resentful. Because the reality is, we have to be able to have conditions to be fulfilled, such as, fidelity. It's a basic one, right? How, how
You would think.
different, right? Different ones that we'll go over, but all our good hearted lady listeners need to know, as well as our good hearted men, that unconditional love does not exist healthily.
Mm. So it sounds like unconditional love can become a trap for us. It's not necessarily a gift. I mean, I feel like you stay, you give, you try to understand and you tell yourself what it's supposed to look like, but then we end up becoming exhausted and questioning ourselves and instead of seeing it as a red flag, I think we just try harder.
You're so spot on. If we try harder, we can make it work because what's parentheses behind that, Sherry? Need to try harder because I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
We need to try harder because I haven't found a way to be good enough yet. It all comes from that less than standpoint. But you know what it really is like, Sherry?
Mm.
Unconditional love. Ladies, I want you to just take this in and and hear this. It's going to sound funny, but it's the truth. Sherry, unconditional love and seeking it is like it's like the emotional equivalent of leaving your front door wide open and wondering why strangers keep walking in,
That sounds about right.
right?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
And it's true.
Mm. So let's be honest. Unconditional love then sounds great until you're picturing it or you're living it in real life.
Oh, absolutely. I love you unconditionally, even though you haven't done a dish since 1998,
Again, so true. I love that.
right?
So, all right, let's go back to judgment. We were talking about that earlier because women are taught that judging is wrong, but you say it's essential.
Judgment is absolutely essential because judgment is how we determine whether someone is safe, compatible, respectful, or even emotionally healthy, Sherry. Judgment is not condemnation. Like I mentioned before, judgment is merely discernment. Good hearted women are taught that judging others is wrong. We're all good hearted people. But even though the judgment is literally how we determine whether or not someone is safe, compatible, or emotionally healthy, there is an additional element also of criteria that are good hearted people. learn. And that is, we're taught untaught lessons that a good hearted person not only should never judge others, but that they must accept others, and that means approve of them.
Mhm.
This is one of the biggest mind blowing lessons, Sherry, that my clients learn in my coaching sessions. And it's one of the reasons that so many good hearted women experience pain in their relationships,
I would agree with that.
right? We learn that good hearted people not only don't ever judge, we learn that it's so tied to the religious teachings. But regardless of anyone's faith, popular religions, the lack of judgment is not anything that is taught in those tomes. Like I mentioned before, they teach that we must not judge others unless we're willing to be judged. Well, here's the thing about all of you good hearted women, you're judging yourself more than the rest of the world.
Mm.
Isn't
That's
that
so
true?
true. That's so true.
So, if you're willing to be judged because you judge yourself, why can't we judge anyone else? And again, it's not to say that they don't deserve to live, it's just that they don't deserve to live within our life. And let me ask you one big, humongous question, Sherry, and I'll ask it of all of our lady listeners. If we aren't supposed to judge anyone, how are we ever going to determine whether a potential partner is a person we approve of, being accepting of, or ever being able to healthily love? If we can't judge, we can't do that. You've heard me say a number of times, good guys don't kick dogs. Well, that's a judgment.
Hmm. So what you're saying is if we remove the judgment, how do we choose what's right for us? And we may end up accepting partners that don't actually work for us and call it love.
Not may, but will. Yeah, you're exactly right. Because if we don't judge, we can't choose. And if we can't choose, you can't protect yourself.
Hmm. So is there ever a place where unconditional love would be appropriate then?
Not in a romantic relationship. It's only between a parent and a child. You know, if we're leaving out the animal kingdom, because I have unconditional love for my dog, but, between humans, it's just between a parent and a child.
Hmm. So you're saying in adult relationships, unconditional love is not only unrealistic, but it really could be unsafe for us.
Not could be unsafe. It is always unsafe.
Mm.
Absolutely always unsafe. And I don't mean physically, I mean, possibly physically, but I mean mainly emotionally and unfulfilling and unhealthy. Adult relationships require conditions, healthy conditions. And just by the statement of that, that means it's not unconditional.
I feel it so deep. So let's reset the standard a little bit then. As women, what should we require?
I love how you put that because the word is very strong and it is require. We must, as good hearted women, and I'm saying we because I'm always there with you on Team Jerry or Team Betty, right?
Yeah.
We must require respect, fidelity, affection, emotional and physical safety, honesty, require openness. We've got to be able to and require dialogue, communication. Without healthy communication, it just doesn't work. That sounds like maybe an optional. It's not. That's the requirement. And here's a big one, you must require to feel good when we're with a partner. When you're with the person that you love and you don't feel good when you leave them or when you're with them, these are red flags we cannot ignore. They're not luxuries. These are conditions.
Hmm. Or like you told me one time, their baseline. This is, you can't give them credit for those things, Sherry. They're baseline and they're non negotiable.
That's exactly right. They're non negotiable. This is not just because somebody has all of these ladies, it does not mean they're the one. Like that session that you and I had. No, you don't get credit, Sherry, for giving him credit because he wore a shirt on the date. No, you have the extras. Okay, these are just the base requirements. These are the minimums.
Yeah.
Everything else on top of that just shows who they are to you and how they're going to treat you, and they're not. a filthy slob, for instance.
I mean, I think it's funny, but, when you have trained yourself to accept less for so long, those baselines feel like a big deal at first. You really have to reset.
Especially sometimes when we see the other options, right?
Yeah, that's true
I
too.
mean, let's yeah. I mean, let's face it. And I'm not here ever on this show to man bash, but let's face it. Over the years, have worked with a lot of them, and it's one of the main reasons I focus solely on empowering women because it's not a great pool. Now, I do workshops to try to educate the men who want to understand how to be a better man, and let me just tell you, Sherry, there aren't a lot of people that sign up for this. And if
Sad.
you look, it is. And if you look in our in our news today, you see the growing population of these idiots that are they call themselves incels, where they think that they have a right to a woman's body.
Yeah, I heard something the other day. They sacrificed themselves by getting married. They're just going to sleep with one person for the rest of their lives, so they're entitled to that now. Was oh,
It's pathetic.
it really?
It is absolutely pathetic. So yet another reason that we're trying to protect and predict all the things that are out there as negatives for our good-hearted women listeners, right?
Yeah. So basically, these things are non-negotiable, and it's not about loving harder, but just recognizing what's missing. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe, yes, recognizing what's missing, but maybe more importantly, recognizing what we deserve to have. Because it's easier to focus on what we are trying to get rather than trying to figure out what's missing. Unconditional love is not the goal. Healthy, reciprocal, respectful, emotionally safe love is the goal, right?
Yeah.
Good hearted women must stop loving without conditions and start loving with clarity, boundaries, and self worth. And I submit to you, ladies, the ladies that feel still, as we're talking about this, Sherry, that feel that loving unconditionally is an attribute, a positive quality, is because they feel that they're not able to find somebody that's going to accept them for them. And that's tragic because being a good-hearted woman is that's all you need to deserve. As I mentioned in a recent episode, Jerry, we're not good-hearted because of our deeds, ladies. Our deeds are done by us because we are good-hearted. Right, Sherry?
Yes. Yes. It's hard to make that shift though, David. I mean, it's so innate and it's uncomfortable to judge and have boundaries when you first start doing it. I mean, like I said, I accepted the baseline as he's great.
It is uncomfortable, and you will remember how I love the fact that you use that word, but you will remember how quickly you took to it because you realize that it was uncomfortable, but it was your innate right to be able to have those conditions, right?
Less uncomfortable than being in a bad relationship, too. Let's be real.
Exactly. We want all of our lady listeners to be the woman that you deserve to be and require the love you deserve to receive.
To say that, require the same in return.
Exactly.
Yeah. I really feel like it's going to speak to a lot of our listeners. I mean, it was very impactful for me too. I mean, I feel like, acceptance versus approval is something to really remember from this episode as well. Would you say that?
Absolutely. Pile on top of that what we have the right to deserve and that we have a right to judge. And it can really filter out some of the people that we might have allowed within our world previously. You think so?
It's so impactful. I mean, it's changed everything for me. So this is a really good episode to listen to, and please share it with anybody that you think needs it because it is. It's a foundational one that can change your life.
And as I always say, Sherry, please share it with everybody you know because you never know who does need to hear it right now. So, for all of us at Her Discovered Power, Sherry, thank you again for doing this. I wouldn't want to do it with anybody else. And for all of our good hearted women listeners, we're here to help you try to be the she you were meant to be. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, David.
See you next time.